Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two and figuring out just what is going on is always a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This episode we're reading Beyond the Black Door by A.M. Strickland, up to but not including Chapter 16, Impolite Intrusions. So we have our main character, Kamai, who grows up a Soulwalker. This means she and, in this case, her mother can go into other people's minds, I think always when they're asleep, and get a peek into these houses that kind of represent their souls and explore. And maybe they have some rules that they follow of trying not to mess things up while they're in there, but they can sneak around and find out things about that person from doing so. Now, Kamai wasn't given a great leg up by her mother, and we'll probably get into this more throughout, but she only knows so much information about how to do it, and even herself doesn't have her own soul house to go into. So
Kamai kind of being left in the dark is so funny, but being left in the dark basically I think matters a lot. It was maybe the most frustrating part of this book so far, just because she doesn't know what she's doing, and whether she joins the Twilight Guild or not, whatever, I feel like the mother should at least have taught her everything she needed to know about soul walking.
Yeah.
Even if she's not going to use it, it's important for her to know how to take care of herself should something have happened. I don't know. That's just me.
I agree. The story almost seems to imply she was, her mother died too young for her to learn everything. But then it's actually she's just about to turn 18. We should be past this point. It's also not like she doesn't know that her mom is a pleasure worker. So it's not like she's too young and innocent for this stuff. It just seems like her mom's default was keep things secret. Maybe she just did it for so long that she just thought that was safer. But it totally sets her up for failure. She doesn't know anything. She has to pry for information from other people, and I don't know. I think she becomes very reactive as a result. So I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of Marin right now because of that, because of what she's done for Kamai. Kamai really could have just known so much more.
Keeping secrets to a 5-year-old is different than keeping them from an 18-year-old.
I agree.
And also, what happens? She dies, and what does Kamai do? She immediately opens the door, right? And not even for a good reason. She opens it because why not? Why not open the door? And Kamai blames herself because it's oh, I'm just too curious. It's first of all, she's not. She shows no curiosity throughout this book. But also, if her mom actually explained things to her, then this would not be a problem. It's just...
Absolutely.
I just really hate that trope of characters will be safer if they don't know what's going on. That is never worked.
Well, it doesn't work in real life because this is a big mistake made generally, I would say, by parents, but I'm going to come at it from the teacher angle because that's where I was taught not to do this bullshit. You tell a kid not to do something and you don't give them the reason to do it, they're gonna do it and find out what the reason is, right? And if you don't give them a reason, then there is no reason that they shouldn't be doing that thing. So just telling a kid oh, don't do that thing, it's bad, don't do that thing because I said so, those are not compelling reasons, and those are little humans. They're going to make decisions based on the evidence that they have. So you can't just not give them a reason for it, especially for 18 whole years. At some point you need to do it, and to not tell her the reason why she doesn't have a soul house of her own is actually crazy, especially because of the kind of internal trauma that she gets from that. So
right, she literally thinks she's without a soul.
Yeah, which how sad.
Right, is especially not useful because in Marin's case, she's lying, right? She's lying about what the Twilight Guild is and how good it is, and then she's you can't trust the Twilight Guild, you can't trust Razim. It's okay, so you're flip-flopping. What am I supposed to do? I've been training to join the Twilight Guild, and now you're telling me they're evil and they're the reason you're dead. So just be honest. Not even omission. You're flat out lying. Just tell me the truth. Why would you not?
Yeah, this is getting ahead on one of my theories of just of not totally trusting Marin, right? As I think that the story is set up for us to be oh, Marin is this perfect character, everyone seems to love her, and she was supposedly doing something good by being kind of a plant in the Twilight Guild. But there's enough here that I could very much see this story going the other way of that's not who she really is. So But also, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I trust that that's what this story is doing. That's like maybe what I would like to see, but not what I believe will happen.
Right. I think that would be interesting because I think this book tries to do like morally gray situations and characters and stuff. But the Marin thing, like, she could have just been more morally gray and it would have been fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, let her be a little selfish. I don't care.
Right.
But they are really setting her up to be like so justified in everything she does. And if she's doing something for the keepers and thus the greater good, then it's like she is just flawless, right? And that's how I feel like it's gonna go. But your point would be much more interesting, I think.
We shall see. We should talk more about Kamai too as she grows up, kind of the person she becomes without her mom, because there's a few things that stuck out to me about her. One is she definitely has this, like, I think this kind of classic YA, like, I'm the cool girl, so I like black and darkness, that I think it edges almost to, like, this is a little too much, but it doesn't quite get there for me. I think it is a little comical when I see it drop in, but
I definitely saw that too, that I'm not like other girls, and I'm just like, of course not.
Yeah, I again, if it played a bigger role, I'd be upset about it, but I think it's just kind of comical. And then the other thing I've noticed a lot about Kamai is she kind of just says what she's thinking a lot of times. I don't think she's very strategic even when she is trying to find out information, because she is, again, like, in the dark about things, but she will, like, find out new information that might be good to, like, keep close to chest and then just totally tell everyone who shouldn't know about the fact that she knows that. And this has been kind of one of the more, I think, frustrating parts of the book, is being like, oh, like, this is good information, you should dig into it more. And then she just goes and confronts someone, and it's like, I don't know if that's how I would have approached it, you know?
Yeah, like, I don't understand. This kind of ties into, like, I just don't understand who she is, like, her drive. Like, she apparently wanted to join the Twilight Guild to be like her mom, but, like, her spy ability, her ability to interact in conversations in general is, like, so poor. Like, I don't understand how she could ever do any of it, because she just kind of shows her hand immediately, is not thinking about her position, and how she literally, she's got like many different fronts wanting to get to her, basically, is how it's working here. And she is just not playing to any of the strengths she has. And for some odd reason, the one person she's keeping secrets from is Nika, who seems to trust her entirely for some reason. Girl power, I guess. But, like, their relationship is so strong for no reason. They have no build up, but we'll accept it, I suppose. And Kamai refuses to tell her anything, and yet Nika is still there to protect her, to teach her self-defense, like, to want to work in her household, like, all of these things.
I know. She's really doing Nika dirty.
Yeah, and Kamai is like, I'm being a bad friend. It's like, yeah, you are, so change your behavior. And she doesn't.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Yeah, and I guess she uses, like, that priestess to justify, like, oh, I'm not supposed to tell anyone anything. It's like, I just don't really think this is the situation for that, but okay. Like, she's literally standing outside the door. Like, I think it'd be fine.
Yeah, and you can tell some parts of it, like,
totally.
You don't have to tell everything, but you can say, oh, Razim is trying to kidnap me because he's obsessed with, like, you can tell some things. Some things are okay.
But then she's got that weird thing about wanting to protect Razim too, so it's like,
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so I would say, like, my favorite parts of this book have not been the main character, unfortunately, just because of these types of behaviors. I don't mind her as kind of the delivery for the story. I think it is a bit of one of those situations where the story is happening to her in many ways as opposed to her driving things, but I am enjoying the kind of other structural parts. It's just her. It's just her behavior that I can't get behind yet. She doesn't really defend herself, too, like, when she is trying to get information, and she's like, oh, you know, she's, like, bartering with someone, like, if it was Vaheen or, I'm blanking, but there's another one where she's kind of, like, trying to find a middle ground where she gives a little something and gets a little something in return as far as information. And I think in every situation she does that, she ends up with nothing and gives everything.
Yeah, I think it's, like, because this is going to sound crazy. She is so reliant on her ability to soul walk, even though she doesn't know how to do it. But, like, that's the only way she's kind of learned how to gather information. She doesn't understand the nuance of the actual way in which you gather information, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, how is Halan gathering any information as a pleasure worker? He's doing it somehow. because he's also part of the Twilight Guild. So
without
like
soul walking.
yeah, and so like where are those lessons? Like she just was not taught anything, was dropped into the middle of nowhere with no information, and is trusting like the first person she sees to then be betrayed so she can trust the first person she sees. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, so another thing for the list of knocks against Marin is, so we mentioned Kamai doesn't have her own soul house, and she's not ever really given a reason why. And I'm blanking on who tells her, but someone tells her that is because it's probably Vaheen.
It was Lenara.
Oh, it was Lenara? Okay, so Lenara tells her it's because her mom hid it from her, basically, and like hid it from the world. And that was maybe the greater goal, was hiding it in general, but hid it so well that even Kamai doesn't have access to it. And she decided not to mention that even, when she was dying. It's crazy to me that like her mom, when she knew something was about to happen, was like, we have plenty of time. Like, go ahead, pack up your things, take your time, and then you're going to get out of here. And tells her none of this stuff. It's, to me, it's a great disrespect to like let your child feel this way about their soul.
I guess like she kind of did. She was like, it's a good thing you don't have one, that it's like hidden because now nobody can get to it. Like that idea is kind of brought up.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel sufficient. It's like
no,
why though?
She's the one who did it. Like she knows why.
Right.
It does, but then beg the question of like, what is the reason, right? Like she's got this weird black door thing and also doesn't have a soul. Like those can't be an accidental pair.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought it might be just like blocking. She knows. To me, Marin knows who Vaheen is, and she's specifically defending against him.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so we've talked a lot about Marin, and we mentioned the Twilight Guild briefly. Do you want to get into what the Twilight Guild is and some thoughts about it?
They're really just like secret keepers, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like fine. Marin does try to justify them a little bit, and I'm like, why all this effort if you're gonna denounce them 2 pages later? But that's fine, I guess. This is like one of the parts where I was like, just accept you're dealing in secrets.
Mm-hmm.
That it's okay. Like it's morally gray if you're like doing it to protect yourself. Like you're still doing something kind of dark and evil, right?
Right.
To other people, and you're getting them killed because of what you're choosing to do. But it's like, if your intent is fine or whatever, or you just want to do it, like that's fine, that's interesting, have it be that. Of course, that all is, gotten rid of when the keepers come into play, but we'll ignore them for now. But for some odd reason, Kamai wants to be one of them. I mean, for some odd reason, she wants to be like her mother, but
she doesn't have any of her own will, so she's got to take someone else's.
Yeah, but it is kind of established that like the Twilight Guild, it's about having value. So they're not great. And then obviously Marin denounces them and says they're not great. They're going to kill us.
Yeah. I guess it did have all of these kind of moral quandary type discussions to it. But to me, it was just like, oh, this is her job,
Yeah, which is fine. Like, I'm willing to accept it because it's interesting in this book. But I think the Twilight Guild kind of gets pushed into being the villain in a not interesting way. I don't know. Because, yeah, there is a lot of ambiguity, right, in what they do. If we want to ride we get good secrets, we get bad secrets. We save people, we kill people. Like, that's fine. That is interesting all on its own. But we have all of this other nonsense happening along with it.
That's a good point. And then we also have to, like, figure out what those reasons... Like, we're not given those reasons, which I guess is fine. Like, it's part of the mystery of the story to figure out whether or not they're good or bad or doing good or bad things. But it doesn't really give us anything to latch onto with them other than just, like, Marin told us that they're bad after working with them.
Right. And the keepers seem to think they're bad as well. Because what happens, right? Like, Marin gets killed by the king's soldiers, maybe. We don't know. They were dressed as soldiers, but they could have been Twilighters, I guess. Halan is killed. The queen consort is killed. Supposedly, I mean, I think the running theory for that right now is the Twilighters gave the king information about how Halan and the queen consort were having an affair for like 20 years. They were killed. That's fine. The Twilight Guild probably used that opportunity to also get Marin killed. But then the question is, like, why do they want to kill Marin, right? The Keepers seem to have this bigger plan going on that, like, involves the monarchy. But it's like, what does the Twilight Guild get out of ruining whatever the keepers are trying to keep in place, basically.
Right.
That's the weird part.
What would the Twilight Guild... Actually, that's a good question of like, what does the Twilight Guild care about that?
Obviously, we don't know anything about them other than like Razim still working with them. And he's important. He is like Halan and the Queen Consort's kid, supposedly. If it's about like fighting for a reign, that doesn't make sense because it's not like he's the king's kid, right? Like, he's just the Queen Consort's kid. It doesn't matter. Unless the king had no other children, I guess. But even that's like a stretch.
Mention that she doesn't give an heir, right?
I think so.
Killed. So maybe that's important.
Yeah, but like he would just get another queen consort. Like
that's what I would think.
I don't really see like both why the Twilight Guild would want to do this when they are working in the background so much, and like what even is the end goal here.
I guess we just need more information. This is one I'd like to have a better theory on, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just worried about them becoming like some in the background villain for the sake of being a villain.
Yeah. Just the secret shady organization.
Right. Because the way they're structured, like, they could truly just be gray, right? And I think that is fine. But I don't know. There's something else going on, but I'm like, why does it matter? Like, if you're bringing down the establishment, is it Razim that matters so much in that?
Yeah, I don't know.
And that would mean you knew Marin was a keeper, I guess, which is entirely possible.
Also, is like killing the keepers necessary for this? Like, is it that vicious of a battle between the two groups?
I guess.
Like, do the keepers matter that much in the maintenance of the king and queen consort that like they are gonna fight the Twilight Guild to prevent? Like, could the Twilight Guild not approach this just by attacking the king's group of people? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I just don't understand.
To be fair, Lenara makes it seem like the king's group of people is useless.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, they just sit around, and it's actually the keepers that keep everything in order, working in the shadows and stuff like that. I guess
the kingdom is fragile anyway, then.
Yeah. But I'm like, what is the reason? I guess if they're the Twilight Guild, maybe they have some secret, like, affinity with the darkness as an entity.
That's a good point, honestly.
But I feel like that hasn't been established very well.
Yeah, and also just given that the keepers are all the Soulwalkers, I don't know, I feel like they'd know more about that than the Twilight Guild would. The Twilight Guild doesn't, they seem to not really be intertwined with the sort of mystical side of things, so.
Yeah, I think the issue is we only know Razim within the Twilight Guild. Like, we've met nobody else. I guess Ciara as well, but like, she doesn't count. So, it just seems like a blackmail group. Like an informant group. So it's like, I don't know. There's not enough for any justification as to why they're doing anything.
Yeah. The only other thing I'll say about Razim too is that he does have this trend of being kind of anti-Marin throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that adds kind of an interesting aspect where, you know, we've kind of talked a lot about not totally trusting Marin or feeling like she made good decisions with Kamai. But like Razim himself is not exactly a trustworthy or, you know, stand-up guy kind of character, so kind of I wonder if they're being pitted against each other in those early stages because it's going to be one side or the other, or if like if that's what's going to complicate things. I guess Razim is a kind of, in this case, a real representative of the Twilight Guild, whereas Marin is secretly a keeper, so maybe that's really what it comes down to. But like I don't trust either of them. So it's like I can't latch on to Kamai's decision to like be like, my mom is everything, or her decision to defend Razim when given the opportunity, because I think she should be keeping an arm's length from both of those ideas.
Yeah, I mean, this idea, I think Kamai has this idea she needs to like prove to Razim that the Twilight Guild is bad, because she still does care for him as like siblings would care for each other. He needs to get the memo on that. But yeah. I think like if you grew up with him your entire life, that's like fine. It's not a terrible way for her to act, but like, I really don't know if Razim's hatred for Marin is like justified hatred or misogyny. Like, I can't tell, because she was a pleasure artist, and she wasn't married, but yet she was still like kind of with his dad, I don't know.
That's possible, but he does seem to know more information about that setup than Kamai does, and I would think it, to me, like that was a business arrangement, right? The whole partnership between Marin and Halan. I would think that Razim was aware of that, and I think it's that he knows something more behind the scenes. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that because he seems to dislike Marin from pretty young. So unless his father was feeding him some information to make him feel that way, or at least telling him to not trust her.
I mean, to be fair, it's like established early on that Marin did not care about Razim at all.
Mm-hmm.
She never treated him like a son and all of that. But obviously, Halan treated Kamai like a daughter. So it's like there could be some beef because of that reason.
Yeah, that would make sense too.
It also does depend on how much the Twilight Guild knew. Because if they just knew Marin was a keeper, but they were keeping that knowledge secret because they wanted to keep an eye on her, like, that's a possibility.
True.
So Razim could have been using that information.
It is interesting that Marin is very specific in saying Halan is not the reason that murder was about to happen, though. Like, she didn't seem to distrust him.
Yeah, so it was probably the Twilight Guild wanting to get rid of her and then just using the opportunity. Because it is weird, like, why would the king kill her? She's not really involved.
She's not involved, right? Yeah, it does, and that kind of comes back to, how much to distrust Razim himself, and Kamai obviously feels this way when the whole attack is happening of, like, I think this is kind of Razim's fault. And I think there's potentially some validity to that, like, and maybe this is what the author's trying to intentionally sow by having them having Razim and Marin beef a little bit, but it does seem a little bit like something that would lead to Marin's death might have Razim connected to it,
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of, like, how involved was he? I know he was involved, but how involved was he in the Twilight Guild? Like, how much did they trust him and his word, and how entangled is he in whatever big moves they have at that moment in time?
I just think he's easy to manipulate, to be honest. Like, he got into it so young, and he wanted to do it so bad. Like, I think he is similar to Kamai, like, willing to trust so easily. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he was just a pawn to the Twilight Guild.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I guess Kamai also runs her mouth to Razim because the moment he comes to try to get her out of the burning house, which did feel convenient, by the way, speaking of he might have been involved, she's immediately, like, telling him why she doesn't trust him and, like, how he has something to do with it and how this is the Twilight Guild. It's like, girl, like, take a deep breath, get out of here first before we give away all of our information.
Yeah. I will say, like, that moment aside, this was maybe the only instance in which I liked Kamai because she's very proactive. The ants fuck her up. We don't need to mention them. Yeah, that was
crazy.
It's so funny. Like, why are we introducing comedy into this book? But
stop.
It was like the only time so far she has done anything.
Right, like, she took things in her own hand. She, like, actively chose, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm running away. Like, I'm doing everything it takes to get away from this.
Yeah.
So she's found by her father's group. She ends up in her, quote, father's care. Not that he wants to be called that.
Which, honestly, I'm just going to say this point right now. Like, I think that's fine. Like, before we found out about his secret and all of that nonsense, him being a bit cold and, like, saying, like, we don't have a relationship, but I'm going to care for you here, but we're not a family. Like, I'm like, that's fine to me. Like,
yeah,
the opportunity to build that relationship would have been so interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's, like, understandable for them not to be super close because they didn't know each other existed.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that was fine. It's understandable if she wants to be a little bit upset, but, like, considering him a monster at this point, I thought was entirely too far. Like, if you want to be closer to him, then build that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously that all gets thrown down the drain, so it doesn't matter.
She comes in indignant from the start, right? Like, she shows up to the house and is already being kind of a pain in the ass, even though she was warned by Nika that, like, he's also going to be a pain in the ass, so maybe don't do that. To a degree, I agree with you in that she isn't really owed much, and this is kind of a service he's doing. I'd definitely be curious to know why he's doing this service, because I can't imagine it's by accident. Like, I can't imagine there's nothing in it for him. Maybe he thinks he's going to get killed somehow if he's entangled with that stuff and wants to take care of her for that reason. I don't know. But I will say, though, like, it is extreme. Like, I think there were ways where he could have set boundaries that didn't require him being a full dick about it. And so it just sets a bad tone. I don't know. Like, to me, I understand Kamai didn't come in with a good angle on this whole situation, but I don't know. He's an adult. Like, there's just, like, a base level of, like, yeah, like, listen, like, this is a really complicated situation. You are, biologically my daughter, but obviously I didn't raise you. Like, we don't have that relationship. So, like, here's how things are gonna go. I think that conversation could have been much more logical and, like, basic than, like, the kind of snarkiness that it had instead.
I do understand your point. He could have just been like, we could get to know each other. Like, he could be a little bit more open, I guess.
Yeah, because he definitely doesn't want even that much. Yeah.
Yeah, but, like, also energy matches energy. Like, she's coming in hot.
For sure. Yeah, and he does at least make that point of, like, I am giving you a home to stay in.
Yeah,
she's so funny too, because she's just kind of standing there, like, in her little mood, and doesn't seem to understand the fact that the whole reason she's here is because he's offered a home to her. And when he, like, walks out of the room without being specific about, like, you're gonna stay with me and I'm gonna feed you, she immediately switches to beg and plead. She's instantaneously like, wait, are you gonna, like, give me a room? Like, am I allowed to stay here? And he's like, yeah, duh. Like, that's why I brought you here. Go to your room now. Like, Nico will take care of it. I'm done with you,
Crazy. This is, like, another instance where she just does not play the game well. Like,
no thinking before speaking.
So dumb. Like, you have nowhere else to go. Like, literally, you have nowhere else to go.
Like, truly. She seemed so ready to let herself be homeless for no good reason, because she would not be able to handle that.
Yeah, she's had an extremely, like, sheltered, privileged life. Like, let it be known. But this scene it bothered me. But like I said, it doesn't matter, because he's garbage. So who cares?
Yeah.
I guess, like, how she finds out he's garbage, though, is Vaheen, who we've talked about a lot, but we'll talk about eventually. He ends up giving Kamai a birthday gift, which is one, how to find secrets in a soul house.
Yes,
which is very useful.
It's a very good birthday gift.
Yeah, and also how, like, the story of how her father basically, like, switched out Marin's birth control so that she'd get pregnant, so she would be forced to stay with him, which is sexual assault, in case anybody was curious.
This is stealthing, is what it's referred to, yeah.
Yeah. The Vaheen part about this, I'll just say, she gets really angry at him about it and is like, apologize for ruining my birthday. And it's like, girl, he gave you a gift.
Okay, like, you made your comedy comment earlier, but the one moment in this book that I laughed where I know I wasn't supposed to, when she was like, and on my birthday. It's like, you're kidding me. That doesn't say that, does it?
Crazy line. Because it's like, get a grip. Like, he taught you something invaluable and also proved your father is a monster before you tried to build any kind of relationship. He did give you a gift. Like,
right, no, that's the thing, is she has a specific desire that he's being, if anything, a very thoughtful gift giver, because the whole point in her, like, creating any sort of relationship with him is to get this sort of information, right?
Right.
She's made very clear a desire she has, and he's like, look, I've met it. Here it is. Like, here's what you've been wanting. And she's like, how dare you?
Yeah, I also think she, like, negates her own point, because the next day she uses the information.
Oh my god, speaking brash.
So it's like,
again.
are you upset you got the info or not? Like, make up your mind, because you're happy to use it and use it like an idiot.
Yeah.
Because you just go up to your father and you're like, I know what you did. And it's like, girl, you're living there for free and you're a child still. Like,
yeah, and
what
like,
do you think is gonna happen?
For someone who seems to respect her mother's secret keeping so well, maybe think for 2 seconds about why she didn't tell you that sooner, right? Like, there's a reason you're not supposed to just be bringing that up right off the bat. So think about what that might be first. And then, yeah, she kind of suffers the consequences for that.
And she's like, I would like an apology. I'm like, grow up. Grow up. Like, please.
It's like a power thing for her, right? Like, she just wants to, like, be like, she just wants to put people in their place, I guess, when she gets this sort of information, and it's not useful. Like, she doesn't see what is past that.
Right. She's riding on, like, a high horse, a moral high horse. But it's like, you've literally accomplished nothing in your life and you don't know anything that's going on. You are in the dark here about everything. So it's like, take in what's happening. Realize you need your father, piece of garbage that he is.
Right.
You need him to like you right now. Because guess what happens? He decides a future career. You haven't cared for, like, the months you've been here. I guess you're just gonna get married now, and I'm gonna sell you off, basically.
Right.
And he can do that. He can do that. And he's happy to at this point, because you've ruined You ruin that relationship. And it's like, just like learn how to protect yourself. Even as
Totally.
simple as that, learn how to protect yourself, because you have nothing. The only reason you can get into people's souls is if they're asleep. How does that help you? Like, it's not right now. This is the waking world. Like, you need to be smarter than this. But she was taught none of this.
Yeah.
She just has to keep begging for help. And it's, like, so frustrating.
Yeah, there's just no social wherewithal, right? Like, understanding of how social things work and, like, how she can, I don't know, interact with the situation in a way that, yeah, like, helps herself. I don't know. I understand that this is not, like, nothing she's experiencing is normal by any means, but I don't think she needs any special skills to think a little bit more about it.
Right. Because it's not like she gets heated in the moment and she reveals that she knows the secret. Like, she walks into breakfast like, I'm about to own this man.
Planned,
and it's like, now you look like a fool because you're crying because now you have to get married. Like...
And also, I'm going to throw some credit to Jeter's here because she should have had a thought about her life a little bit sooner than this.
Yeah.
I know she was, like, confused. She was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do if I don't follow my mom's exact path. Isn't that what everyone else does? And so, I don't know. I get that, but she should have thought, given that she does not want to follow that, like, what can she at least do to cover herself right now? Say she does want to, like, just soul walk and find out a way to make that happen. You're 18 right now, so you might have to figure that out later. Figure out what you're going to do right now to cover up. And so that way you can do that on the side or whatever.
There's just, like, there's no thought. Even with the revenge thing, like, she found a place in the Keepers now, kind of. But, like, even Lenara is, like, there are Keepers that are married. There are Keepers that have a job. Like, you don't just be a Keeper. You are other things. And that's why you're also a Keeper. Like,
yeah.
She just is only thinking about revenge, which, like, makes sense in this book, but, like, who is she? Like, what else does she like to do? What does she want to do with her life? Because obviously she doesn't want to be a pleasure artist, which is fine. So it's like, what else are you doing here? And then she ruins any opportunity for time. Jeedris could have given her time to figure this out, but she completely burned that relationship. And now she's going to go get married to somebody.
Yeah, all she needed to do was be bearable, really.
Right.
Because if she's just bearable, then he's not noticing her, and she can just keep living in that house while she figures herself out. But instead, she decided to make waves.
Yeah. And if Jeedris is seeing her as a Marin he can now control, which I'm assuming is what's happening here, then, like, playing along and staying with him and just kind of, like, you are being submissive, right? Which is probably, like, a problem within this whole society, but, like,
right,
you're kind of submitting yourself so that you can be subversive at the same time, which is what Hishara is supposedly all about, and that's, like, the only thing you care about. But, like, Kamai doesn't know how, like, she doesn't understand how to do that in any capacity.
Yep.
The only other thing I'll, like, say about Jeedris is, like, I'm kind of annoyed that he kind of became just evil in the general sense. Like, I don't understand why all the men in this book are garbage.
Could have been more complex maybe instead.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think we've mentioned earlier as well, it's just, like, such an easy way to make Marin seem like the good guy even more. Because it's like, why did she keep this a secret? Oh, because he's a piece of garbage. Like, it justifies her actions. And it could have just been as simple as she left because she didn't want to have a kid with him. Like, that's why she left. Like, she didn't want to be tied down. Whatever the reason is, that could have been fine on its own. Because it is also weird that she trusts him enough to take care of Kamai. Like, why would you send Kamai to Jeedris and not just send her straight to Lenara?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because we haven't really talked about that. Like, what is the reason for looping in Jeedris enough? Again, there has to be some sort of other motivation for Jeedris to even do this, like some way in which he's entangled, and that is what Marin must have used to make this happen. But yeah, it does beg the question, why would she choose that for Kamai versus someone else?
Right, especially if Jeedris is controlling and, like, a piece of shit. Like, it just puts Kamai in more harm than it does help her.
Yeah, and especially because she doesn't exactly prep her for, like, protecting herself as a soul walker, you know, and this is a different aspect of it, like, from other people, right? Like, so when she has to, like, get ready for that party, she needs to go be approved by a priestess or a priest, and, like, she doesn't know Lenara exists, right? Like, her mom doesn't set her up for success there, but her mom has obviously used her in the past. So why send her out to the capital where that is something that could happen and not also give her the context of, like, you're going to be in the capital with your dad. Like, here's some things you need to know.
Right. And it's also weird that, like, Lenara didn't know. Like, if the keepers had suddenly heard Marin was dead, Kamai was with her father, like, which I feel like is information they probably had. I think Lenara mentions they were going to reach out to Kamai at some point, but, like, if they had all that information, why was Lenara not just waiting for Kamai at the place? Like, why did Vaheen have to step in and save her? I mean,
Right.
it's so that she trusts him more. That's whatever. But, like, it's an unnecessary middleman when Lenara could have just done that on her own. And it would have been better that way, I think.
Yeah.
But it just feels like Kamai is just stumbling into these situations with, like, no information.
Mm-hmm.
It thankfully works out because she has some darkness in her head.
Yeah, I was going to say, we need to start talking about this. I guess we'll take it a step back. She opens this black door much before much of the things we've been talking about, because we've talked about Vaheen a lot.
So the mythology is basically set up as, like, you have Ranta, which is the earth, which is the child of Heshara, who's the moon, and then I think it's Tayin, who's the sun. And the story is that, like, darkness wanted to get to Ranta, so the parents would, like, orbit around her, basically, which is, like, you know, how celestial nonsense works.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, like, the backstory. Ranta gets married continuously to the human king, and that, like, creates a blessing over the earth, I guess. So Ranta is, like, missing, but also forever married to a human king, and the human king thus has a queen consort to birth heirs, is how I think that goes.
Mm-hmm.
The keepers maintain this because I guess there is actually some blessing that happens because of that. It also means that women kind of are submissive because, I mean, Heshara works in shadows. She is Moi the moon, and, you know, the sun is big and bright and powerful, and, you know, we love that for the king. And Ranta is just not around, right? So women are just kind of pushed to the side, but they want to be there. They want to, apparently. That's what they've been saying.
Yeah, though I guess Nika would probably have some things to say about that.
And boy, does she. So my idea is, like, this origin story being mentioned, it kind of just means Kamai is probably Ranta, because Ranta is missing, and also Kamai having the black door is probably darkness trying to get to Kamai, thus Ranta. And also, like, Marin hiding Kamai's soul house, it's probably because it's not a normal soul house.
Interesting. Because she's Ranta.
Yes, because she's Ranta.
Oh,
in some other
boy.
form.
I definitely did not read this note ahead, so like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I definitely agree that I think Vaheen is the darkness. It makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't think about the idea of Kamai potentially being Ranta. They do mention her being missing a lot, which I just think is weird for, like, a god or goddess character to refer to them as missing, because it's like, do you see, I guess you see the sun and the moon, so you're like, okay, they're there, but you're also on the earth, so unless you're saying the earth isn't Ranta, a lot of reasons for me to not understand what they mean by her being missing. But that is an interesting concept that, like, yeah, if she is Ranta, her soul house might be wild, and I still think that supports the idea that hiding it would also be hiding it from Vaheen because he is the darkness. It all makes lots of sense. One thing that I'm concerned about with this path is if this book ends where it comes to be known that she is Ranta, and we talked a little bit earlier about what if the Twilight Guild is kind of trying to overthrow the current state of society, and, like, why is Razim so important? Like, is this book going towards Razim and Kamai actually being together?
That would be disgusting.
Wouldn't that be crazy?
I mean, if they're trying to have Razim become the king in some play for the throne for some reason, then it would make sense that Razim and Kamai as Ranta would be together. But, like, that's not breaking down the system, right? So It's like, I don't know why the keepers would care about that. I also don't know why the keepers are, like, keeping it a secret. Like, unless the keepers are trying to keep this established order, and that makes them the bad guy, right? Like, maybe Ranta wants to be with the darkness, which is evident if it's Kamai and Vaheen, but maybe that breaks down the system, and so the keepers are trying to maintain that system. But that does make them the villain of the story, right? Which wouldn't be a bad thing it would play into like your earlier idea of Marin being set up as this perfect person and then that kind of being tossed aside. That seems like a lot for Kamai to go through, but like I wouldn't be upset about it. But like the Twilight Guild would then be going about something similar to breaking that system down, but in a different way with Razim instead. Well, no, they'd be keeping it because Razim would be an earthly king married to Ranta,
right?
Supposedly. So, yeah, I don't know why the Keepers and the Twilight Guild would be enemies here.
I do think there's an interesting concept there, though, of like, you know, we have effectively 4 god figures, 2 of them that are together and 2 of them that are kind of unrelated and single, if you will. You know, like there could be kind of a pairing thing happening with them that would make sense with what sort of romance is happening between Kamai and Vaheen right now.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting that like Kamai's parents kind of symbolize the moon and sun, because like obviously Marin was a keeper, so she was working under Hashara as the
and just
as
like a
moon.
Soulwalker in general. That they said that kind of belongs to her.
Yeah, and then Jidris is a tax collector, right? Which is considered a solar job,
right?
Which is affiliated with Tyene. So it's like she has both of those things going on.
But it's interesting because she's a little resistant to the earth things, right? The earthen ones. Because that's like what Nika does.
But there's also other things. Like there's the pleasure artists as well. And other jobs are like farming and herbalism.
I feel she's not into any of that.
Yeah, the only thing she's interested in is like, there's a lot of mentions of atlases. Like she really likes tracing over an atlas and like those kinds of books. So like books of the earth.
No, that's actually a good point, yeah.
It's not strong, but it could be strong enough to be like a hint.
Maybe it's just that she hasn't leaned into it yet and she'll end up finding that is for her. Maybe that's what Nika's there for.
I fucking hope so, because she has nothing right now.
Yeah, and like, I guess that does make a lot of sense given that she's kind of obsessed with her mom, who's definitely like the lunar type. I guess we'll see. And like, actually, and another point to that credit too is that she isn't really wanting to do some of the things her mom did with that. Like, she's kind of limited on her knowledge of soul walking, but also like I don't actually think she's lined up for the jobs that comes with.
Yeah, I mean, she makes a comment that like being a priestess would be boring. Like walking into somebody's soul all the time would be boring, which like I understand not liking it because you're working for the king, but like that's what you wanted to do. Right. So I was like confused by that line. But it does seem like, yeah, she is interested in it because of her mom, but like she doesn't really care that much about it. And then obviously all of the solar pursuits she just does not care about. But Vaheen himself,
he's got some intentions that we don't know about. Like he's got a mystery of his own to figure out.
I mean, for sure, he was trapped in a dark door. He's probably got a lot going on. Which is like crazy that Kamai doesn't care more about learning about that.
She's only there for her own interests, right?
Yeah, she wants information about what happened to her mom, but like she kind of learns he's not human, and then that's been it. Like, yeah. I don't think she's kind of tried to sleuth out what exactly he is, which feels very important.
Yeah, I mean, she's pretty horrible at getting information, I feel like we've talked about, so...
Yeah.
Because she's not even getting her own info. Like, it's taking so long for her to get the stuff she's there for.
Right. It's just like, I don't know, if I had a darkness inside of my soul that only I could interact with or, like, open the door to, I feel like I would question that a little bit more.
You'd at least want to know where it came from. Like, who put you here? Like, why are you stuck here?
Right. It's just so strange. So strange. But, like, regardless, he is... I was going to say he's courting her, but not really. Their relationship is interesting.
I also feel like Kamai is kind of making more slights at that than he is.
For sure. When the birthday gift came up, she was like... I was, like... hoping for romance or something like that, and he was surprised, and I'm like, bitch, me too.
It was kind of weird. Yeah,
it was weird. It's the normal issue, right, with the one-off book in which their relationship is kind of forced a little bit. I think they have a good like banter energy. They don't really. He does. She's kind of whatever, but that I could understand. Them moving into a romance possibly is a little quick for me.
I think it's a little quick for him too, though, to help you out there.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I don't think he understands it either.
Yeah, because, like, he kind of tries to make physical approaches, and that doesn't really land right?
Yeah, I think they do kiss by the time we stopped, but like he didn't really know what he was doing and
Right.
she wasn't really into it. But it was kind of romantic, I guess.
It's kind of, what's cute about it is them trying to figure it out. Like that part, I'm like, like I kind of like where it's like, you guys, that at least Kamai knows like there's something like very intriguing to her about Vaheen, but like not having gotten a good example of how to approach that structure and just like kind of navigating the field.
Right, because like a worry I had early on was like if asexuality was going to be conflated with aromanticism, because sometimes it is. But I think her thinking it is makes sense because that is what we're taught, right? Like you have romance and that leads to a sexual relationship. Like they go hand in hand. And so when you don't want the sexual relationship part, you're left thinking, well, I guess I don't want romance, or I guess I'll never have romance, right? And her kind of starting to understand that isn't the case, mostly like mainly because of Vaheen being like, I don't degrade myself with sexual acts. Like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what he says.
I know, I love it.
But like, that distinction starts to become apparent because obviously they kind of like each other, but they don't want to have sex together. They don't even really want to kiss together for the most part. And that's like fine. So yeah, their relationship development, I wish there was more romance, kind of, and that they were a little bit closer, but I'm not upset about the way in which it's going so far.
Yeah, I get you, because I want to believe it more, especially from Vaheen's end. But yeah, I kind of agree that I'm not upset. This is maybe one part of the book where I wouldn't mind a little more fleshing out of like, it seems like there's definitely been some visits we haven't seen. And maybe we don't need every single detail of that, but I think without that, we do lose some relationship development and understanding of like what sort of entertaining is Kamai doing for Vaheen to eventually earn this like birthday gift, for example, to like eventually actually get some sort of information out of him. Obviously, he's making it like last a long time and making her put in some hours, but I want to know more about what that means.
Right, because like at the minute, it's kind of just like a claim. It's the same with Razim. Like Vaheen has placed a claim on Kamai, and she's obviously against that, and he doesn't understand what that means because he's not a human and all of that kind of stuff, which is like fine, you can work through that. But like, yeah, that alone is not enough to build this romance. Like we need to see him not necessarily becoming more human. I think it's fine that he's not human, but like we need to see them hashing out that aspect of their relationship because it is distinctly like not human.
Right.
And she either needs to be like okay with that, or she needs to like set a boundary that isn't just I'm not going to see you anymore and then she goes and sees him. Like something needs to be established between the two of them.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. Like dark romance and like non-human romance is very difficult because like obviously just saying somebody belongs to you or like you have claim over somebody isn't a good way to have a relationship, but there are some affordances that can be given, and there are some ways in which that can work for the couple that's going through that, but like I don't know, we just haven't seen enough of that work through, I guess.
It just depends on the development aspect, and we haven't gotten there, so
yeah, I'm worried about if we are.
Yeah, that's a good point.
She's relying so much on him to help her, but like relying on him, his help and his protection isn't doing anything to help your argument that you should belong to yourself, I guess, is the way. Like, it's okay if you need his help, but like you also can't stand on your own two legs, so why would he not see you as like a possession to take care of?
Yeah, because it needs to reach a certain point where there's some balance here, right? Like, even if that's like an early stage of the relationship, like if it's gonna last that way, it needs to be named, and if not, like they need to be able to work through that. I have a few more thoughts I'd like to talk about with Vaheen.
Of course.
I guess I kind of already asked this question of like, so where did he come from? We talked about the origin story of the darkness, and maybe even more so in line with that story, like I kind of wanted to know what responsibility Marin might have had in this happening this way. She obviously seems to know more about it than we do, and so part of it for me, I was like, I think Marin knows Vaheen. I think they've interacted before. I don't think it's just an awareness of his existence even. Like my thought is they've interacted before and she's learned not to trust him. And that is what led to this. If it is like supposed to truly parallel that God origin story, then that makes even more sense because that story kind of says enough on that, I think. I almost thought, and like the theory that I'm gonna try to run with this episode for the rest of this episode is thinking that maybe there was a thing between Marin and Vaheen, and to me that might make sense because Vaheen seems to exist outside of time a bit, and because Marin mentions shortly before being killed that part of the problem that led to what's happening is that she fell in love, and it's somewhat implied that that's supposed to be Halan, and I don't believe that. I'm wondering if it's that she fell in love with Vaheen. And so, therefore, somehow he's the reason that this stuff is happening.
Oh, maybe like if she like initially released him or did something that gave him more freedom and then she had to kind of lock it up.
Exactly.
Which put her in this awkward position. I could see something like that. The
difficult part of that is it would have happened probably 20 years ago or more. But that to me, like, there has to be something that, right, something has to lead to the protection aspect, to the like, let's hide the soul, like, gotta watch out for my daughter, like, there's a history we don't know. My guess is that it's a romantic history, but I don't know. I have no idea, but that's what I want to run with.
It'd be weird to lock him inside Kamai though, like,
but maybe the thing that happened while they were involved is Vaheen took advantage of the situation to try to like kind of take over her daughter, because I mean, look at what he can do with her now. He can manipulate her, he can speak in her head, all this stuff. So maybe that's kind of what, maybe like she was already exposed to Vaheen and she locked him down.
Possibly.
That's the most convincing possibly I've ever heard.
Sorry, I'm like thinking.
Yeah,
I think that would make sense. I feel like that'd be a wild play. It would also be weird between Kamai and Vaheen.
Oh yes, yeah. I think if that were the case, like, they are not together in the end of the story.
Yeah.
The only way I can justify that, the kind of weirdness of that, of like him being with a mom and then later on the daughter, is that he's like a god figure who doesn't like have concept of age, you know? And like that kind of connection aspect, like I think that could just not compute for him, and therefore it would make sense for him to do it. And without Kamai knowing, she doesn't know not to. I don't know. I think character wise it could work. I don't know if the author would have written that, of course, which is like the problem with all theories. But I'd be curious to see if more things could support that as we go throughout, even if it doesn't happen.
Yeah, not necessarily a relationship, but I could definitely believe Marin knowing more.
Yeah, I think that's at least true.
Yeah. So right towards the end of where we left off, obviously Kamai has gotten very lucky to meet Lenara, and she's figured out that there's a group called the Keepers that's against the Twilight Guild for some reason, and Kamai is like, perfect, I'm ready to join.
Immediately, no knowledge, no information.
And she ends up saying the sacred vow, which is crazy to me, to say a sacred vow for like a person you basically just met.
And this is another case where she doesn't defend herself, right? She asks a question, she asks for more information, doesn't get it, and then still keeps going.
Yeah, she doesn't like stand her ground in any way. It's like, the frustrating thing is, like, obviously Kamai has power, right? There is something about her that needed to be protected. She has a dark door in her head. Like, she has all of these things that, like, nobody is telling you that's important, but, like, put the pieces together. It's important. Like, you have a lot more standing, and a lot more people want to either get you or protect you. So, like, use that, right? Like, what is Lenara gonna do if you say no,
right,
and you don't join the Keepers and you leave, right? Like, obviously you're being protected for a reason, which she probably knows.
Right.
So she would do what you wanted if you knew. Like, you just have to understand how powerful you are in that situation. But like, it's we've talked about it 50 million times. Like, she just backs down and she begs and she takes sacred vows, which I'm sure will be a problem later.
Yes,
but you know, whatever.
Yeah, because there's also that specific line of like, failure means being cast out into darkness. And it's like we can't overlook that with Vaheen.
Yeah.
I wonder what he feels about this, because he's also the one who brought her to Lenara. Like, he must have known. I don't know what specific knowledge he has or what godly knowledge he has, but he knew to bring her to her to get past this test, the first time they met. So then it makes me wonder, like, would he have wanted to do that knowing that she would also potentially work in an organization that's against him? Or is that organization actually supporting him secretly?
Yeah, the idea of, like, Hashara is so strange, because, like, part of her is cast in darkness, right? Like, you have the moon cycles and also just the night sky in general. Like, she is kind of all of that. So the idea that she would have a closer relationship with darkness would make sense.
Right.
The fact that she hides in shadow
Yeah.
and is more, like, subversive, like, it would make sense if she had some kind of relationship with Vaheen. But if Vaheen's only goal, or if Darkness's goal is to get to Ranta, and Hashara doesn't want that to happen, then it's like, then what, like, yeah, what is that relationship? What are the Keepers actually doing? Like, that seems straightforward, but, like, the mythos behind those two, I feel like there should be more there. I don't know if that'll get explored at all, though, but
yeah,
I guess we'll see what happens. It's a one-off, it says, so, you know, it should all get wrapped up.
I'm both nervous but excited. Like, I overall still have, at least for me, I've enjoyed reading this book so far.
Yeah, we'll see. I feel like it's, like, set up to be for me, because it's, like, the mythology and, like, all of that stuff, but for the most part, I feel kind of indifferent, I guess, is a good way to put it. Like, there are things that I like well enough. Vaheen and, like, the asexuality, I guess, is fun, but I don't know. Some things just feel too quick. Maybe this should have been a series. I don't know.
I guess we'll see how we feel at the end.
Yeah. So obviously, if you have your own thoughts and theories, the Twitter is 5050_books, and there's also the Goodreads and YouTube and all of that nonsense in the description. Obviously, next episode we're finishing the rest of this book, and see you on the flip side.
Bye.